Some nights arrive quietly without announcing themselves, and you may not even notice the moment when the day truly ends. The light changes almost imperceptibly, the sounds outside thin out, and what remains is a softer kind of awareness, one that does not ask much of you, yet somehow makes you more aware of your own presence. It is not an uncomfortable feeling, not exactly, but it can feel unfamiliar, as if the world has stepped slightly farther away than usual. On nights like this, it is easy to sense a kind of distance, not only from other people or from the day that has passed, but from the larger rhythm that usually carries you without effort. The room may feel still in a way that highlights your own breathing, your own thoughts, your own quiet existence within the dark. There's nothing wrong with this moment, and nothing unusual about noticing it. This is simply how the night sometimes opens. You may find yourself aware of small details that normally fade into the background. The weight of your body resting where it is, the way the air feels against your skin, the gentle rise and fall of each breath moving on its own without instruction. These sensations are not asking you to change anything. They are simply there, steady and unremarkable, continuing whether you pay attention to them or not. Tonight does not require effort. You do not need to settle anything, reflect on anything, or prepare yourself for rest in a particular way. If the mind feels alert, that is fine. If it feels dull or heavy, that is fine as well. The night is patient, and there is no expectation placed on you here. This time is not about doing, improving, or fixing. It is only about allowing the moment to be what it already is. Sometimes the quiet of night can make the sense of being alone feel more noticeable, not in a dramatic way, but subtly, like a background tone you were not aware of until everything else became silent. This does not mean that something is missing. It only means that the usual distractions have stepped aside, leaving space for a different kind of awareness to emerge, an awareness that does not need interpretation or response. As you listen, there is no need to follow these words closely or hold on to their meaning. They are meant to move past you at their own pace, like sounds heard from a distance, present but not demanding attention. If your thoughts wander, let them wander. If they slow down, allow that too. Nothing important will be lost either way. The night does not ask you to understand it. It does not ask you to feel calm, connected, or reassured. It simply continues, carrying everything gently forward, including you. All you need to do is remain where you are, letting the quiet unfold naturally, without trying to shape it into anything else. For now, you can rest in this moment exactly as it is, knowing that there is nowhere you need to go and nothing you need to reach. The story will continue slowly and without urgency, and you are free to listen as much or as little as you wish, allowing the night to do what it does best in its own unhurried way. You may notice that as the night deepens, the sense of time begins to loosen its grip. Minutes do not move with the same sharp edges they had during the day, and the usual markers that separate one moment from the next start to blur. This softening is not something you need to create. It happens on its own as the mind realizes there is no schedule to follow and no outcome to reach. In this slower atmosphere, awareness can spread out gently, no longer focused on any single point. sounds, sensations, and thoughts may drift in and out without forming a clear pattern, and that is perfectly natural. The night does not organize itself into steps or instructions. It unfolds gradually, allowing everything to exist without needing to be placed in order. If there is a faint feeling of distance present, you do not need to move toward it or away from it. You can let it remain exactly as it is, neither examined nor resisted. Often, when nothing is done with such sensations, they begin to change on their own, not disappearing, but losing their sharpness, becoming less defined, less demanding. This is not a moment that needs to be understood. It is enough to be here, listening, breathing, resting within the steady flow of the night. The story will continue in its own time, and as it does, there is no requirement for you to stay alert or follow along. You can allow attention to drift, knowing that even in this quiet state, nothing is out of place. There are times when the feeling of distance appears without a clear reason. Nothing particular has changed, nothing dramatic has happened, and yet the space between you and everything else seems slightly wider than before. This sensation is easy to mistake for something personal, as if it reflects a truth about your life or your relationships. But very often it is simply a shift in how the mind is perceiving the world at that moment. The human mind is remarkably sensitive to contrast. During the day it is surrounded by signals, sounds, movement, and constant interaction. At night, many of those signals fade, and when they do, the mind does not always interpret the quiet as neutral. Instead, it sometimes fills the absence with a sense of separation, not because separation has increased, but because the usual points of reference have softened or disappeared. In low light and reduced stimulation, perception turns inward by default. Attention moves away from the outer world and begins to circle more closely around thoughts, sensations, and internal states. This inward turn can make the boundaries between self and surroundings feel sharper, even though nothing external has actually pulled away. It is a shift in focus, not a change in reality. This is why distance often feels strongest at night, not because you are more alone, but because the mind has fewer external anchors to rest on. Without those anchors, it becomes easier to notice the quiet space around thoughts, the pauses between sounds, and the subtle awareness of being here, awake, while much of the world seems to be resting. The sensation can feel unfamiliar, but it is not a sign that something is wrong. Understanding this is not something you need to actively do right now. You do not need to analyze the feeling or trace it back to a cause. It is enough to recognize that the experience of distance can arise naturally as part of the way perception adjusts itself in quieter conditions. It comes and goes, often without asking for attention, and it does not require a response. For now, you can allow this awareness to remain gentle and open without labeling it or pushing it away. The night offers plenty of room for perception to soften again, and as the story continues, there will be time for this sense of distance to slowly lose its intensity without effort and without direction. One of the reasons this sense of distance can feel so convincing is that the mind often treats perception as fact. When something feels far away, it is easy to assume that it truly is. Yet feeling distant and being distant are not the same thing. The mind is skilled at creating impressions, especially in quiet moments, and those impressions can take on a weight that feels real, even when nothing has changed in the world itself. Distance, as it is experienced at night, is often a matter of contrast rather than separation. During the day, connections are reinforced by constant interaction, by voices, messages, and movement. At night, those reinforcements pause, and the absence of stimulation can be misread as absence of connection. What you are sensing is not a loss, but a pause, a temporary stilling of outward signals. This is similar to the way a familiar room can feel different when the lights are turned down. The walls have not moved, and the space has not expanded, yet the edges seem less certain. Shadows soften boundaries, and the mind fills in the gaps. In the same way, the night softens the edges of experience, and the mind interprets that softness as distance. It can be helpful to know that this is a common human experience, shared quietly by many, even though it often feels personal when it arises. The sensation does not belong to you alone, and it is not something you need to carry or resolve. It is simply one of the ways perception adjusts itself when the world becomes less demanding. As the night continues, this sense of distance does not need to disappear in order for rest to arrive. You do not have to overcome it or replace it with a different feeling. Often, when it is allowed to exist without resistance, it gradually loses its clarity, becoming less defined, less central to awareness. You can let this part of the experience remain in the background, like a faint echo rather than a solid presence. There is no need to move closer to anything, and no need to push anything away. The story will continue to unfold, gently shifting attention away from the idea of distance itself and toward a quieter understanding that requires no effort at all. If you look closely at almost anything in the natural world, it becomes difficult to find something that truly exists on its own. Even the simplest things depend on conditions that are easy to overlook. A sound needs air to travel through. Warmth relies on movement and contact. A breath only happens because there is something outside the body to receive it and something inside ready to release it. These relationships are so ordinary that they rarely draw attention, yet they are constant. Nothing appears suddenly, fully formed and independent. Everything emerges within a web of influences, shaped by what surrounds it and sustained by what continues to interact with it. This is not something that requires belief or interpretation. It is simply how things behave when observed over time. In nature, separation is more often a matter of perspective than structure. A tree may look like a single object standing apart, but its life extends far beyond what is visible. Beneath the surface, roots intertwine with soil, water, and unseen organisms. Above the surface, leaves exchange air and light with the sky. The tree is not contained within its outline. Its existence stretches outward in quiet, continuous ways. The same pattern appears in systems much larger than a single organism. Weather does not arise from one point alone. Oceans respond to distant forces. Even small changes ripple outward, affecting places far from where they began. These movements are not coordinated by a central plan. They unfold naturally through ongoing interaction without needing awareness or intention. Because these processes are always in motion, they are easy to miss. The mind often prefers clear boundaries and defined units because they are easier to grasp. Yet the world itself does not organize experience in this way. It functions through relationship, through exchange, through constant adjustment. What appears solid and separate is often held together by layers of connection that remain just below the surface of attention. For now, there is no need to hold on to these ideas or arrange them into a clear picture. You are not being asked to understand a system or remember a lesson. These words are only pointing gently toward a way of noticing, one that allows the sense of isolation to loosen slightly without effort, simply by observing how nothing truly stands apart. When many elements influence one another at the same time, it becomes difficult to point to a single center. Instead of one clear source, there is a pattern of exchange where each part responds to what is nearby while also affecting what lies farther away. This kind of structure does not rely on hierarchy or control. It continues simply because each relationship supports the next. In such systems, change does not move in straight lines. It spreads softly, often unnoticed, passing from one point to another without announcing itself. A slight shift in temperature alters the movement of air. That movement influences moisture. Moisture shapes clouds. Clouds affect light. Light changes how warmth is received. None of these steps act alone, yet together they form something familiar, something steady enough to be taken for granted. This way of functioning can feel strange to the mind, which often prefers clear beginnings and endings. It is easier to imagine one thing causing another than to sense many influences meeting at once. But the world rarely unfolds in simple chains. It behaves more like a field where everything present contributes quietly to what happens next. Because there is no single center, nothing needs to hold everything together. The balance emerges on its own, moment by moment, through countless small adjustments. When one part changes, the rest respond naturally, without effort, without instruction. This responsiveness is not fragile. It has been unfolding for as long as the world has existed, adapting continuously without needing to be noticed. At night, when activity slows and the usual signals fade, it can become easier to sense this broader movement. The absence of noise allows subtler patterns to come forward. Sounds feel more spacious. Time feels less segmented. The world does not shrink in these moments. If anything, it reveals how much is happening quietly beneath the surface, even when nothing seems to be moving at all. There is no requirement to understand this fully or to hold it clearly in mind. The purpose here is not clarity, but familiarity. A gentle recognition that what appears still or empty is often alive with relationship. That recognition does not need words or conclusions. It can remain in the background, like a low, steady presence, as the night continues to unfold. When this way of seeing settles in, even briefly, the idea of being completely separate begins to feel less solid, not because it has been argued against, but because it no longer fits as neatly as it once did. The world, observed closely, does not present itself as a collection of isolated pieces. It behaves more like a continuous exchange where boundaries exist for convenience, not as firm divisions. This does not mean that differences disappear. Forms remain distinct. Sounds remain separate from silence. One moment remains different from the next. Yet beneath these differences, there is a shared movement, a quiet continuity that does not draw attention to itself. It is present whether it is named or not, noticed or ignored. At night, when effort eases and the mind becomes less occupied with sorting and labeling, this continuity can sometimes be felt rather than thought. It may appear as a subtle sense of space, or as a softening of edges, or simply as a feeling that the world is not as fragmented as it seemed during the day. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing needs to change. The shift is gentle, almost easy to miss. This is not an insight that needs to be held on to. In fact, trying to keep it clear can make it fade. It is enough to let the impression pass through awareness, leaving behind a quieter atmosphere, one in which the idea of standing alone feels less certain, not because something has been added, but because something has relaxed. As this section comes to a close, there is no need to reach for a conclusion or draw a lesson from what you have heard. The story is not moving toward an answer. It is simply creating space. Space for perception to rest. Space for the sense of distance to lose its sharpness. Space for the night to continue unfolding without requiring you to understand why. In the next part of the story, attention will move closer, not inward in a demanding way, but gently toward what is already present. For now, you can remain exactly where you are, letting these impressions settle on their own, as the quiet rhythm of the night carries everything forward, without separation and without effort. As attention begins to move closer, it does not need to turn inward in a sharp or deliberate way. There is nothing here that needs to be examined, adjusted, or understood. It can be enough to notice what is already happening, quietly and without effort, just as it has been happening all along. The body is resting where it is. The breath continues its slow rhythm. Sounds arrive, linger briefly, and fade without asking for permission. None of this requires your involvement. Breathing happens whether it is noticed or not. Sensations appear without being invited and disappear without explanation. Even listening is not something you actively do. Sound reaches you simply because there is space for it to arrive. There is no reaching outward, no pulling inward, no need to position yourself in relation to what is happening. It may be helpful to sense this gently without trying to form a clear picture. The air that touches your skin is not separate from the air that carries sound through the room. The movement of your breath does not stop at the edge of your body. It blends naturally with the surrounding space, rising and falling as part of a larger, quiet motion that does not belong to you alone. When attention rests here, even briefly, the idea of being outside begins to soften. Not because it has been replaced with a different idea, but because it no longer fits the experience unfolding in this moment. There is no clear point where you end and the night begins. No sharp boundary that divides inner from outer. There is only a continuous field of sensation, sound, and stillness, all unfolding together. This does not need to feel comforting or profound. It does not need to feel like anything in particular. If the mind tries to label the experience, you can let those labels pass without following them. If attention drifts, allow it to drift. If it settles, allow that too. Nothing here needs to be held in place. For now, It is enough to remain with this simple noticing. The sense of being placed somewhere outside of experience can rest without being challenged or corrected. The story is not asking you to move closer or to step away. It is simply allowing attention to recognize that it has never been positioned at the edge to begin with. As awareness remains gentle, it may begin to settle more naturally into the body, not by focusing on it, but by noticing its presence without effort. The body does not need to be scanned or adjusted. Its weight is already supported. Its position is already known, even without thinking about it. Muscles soften where they can, and where they cannot, they are allowed to remain as they are. There is often an assumption that awareness sits somewhere inside, looking outward, but this assumption does not need to be held here. Sensation does not announce where it begins or ends. Warmth spreads without a clear boundary. Pressure fades gradually rather than stopping at a line. The body is not experienced as a closed container, but as something open, responsive, quietly exchanging with the space around it. In this openness, the idea of a center can begin to feel less fixed. Attention does not need to stay in one place. It can move slowly or not move at all, resting wherever it happens to land. There is no correct point of focus. The night does not organize experience into priorities. Everything present is allowed to share the same level of importance or the same lack of it. When attention drifts toward the edges of sensation, it does not fall away. It simply becomes wider. Sounds at a distance are not outside awareness. Neither are subtle sensations close by. They coexist easily, without competing. There is no need to gather them together or separate them into layers. Awareness is already spacious enough to hold them without effort. If the sense of having a clear boundary begins to soften, you do not need to follow that shift or encourage it. Let it happen or not happen in its own way. The story is not guiding you toward a particular state. It is simply allowing attention to rest in a place where edges are less defined and nothing needs to be held apart. Here, the question of where you are in relation to the world does not need an answer. The body is present. The space around it is present. Awareness moves freely between them without needing to decide where it belongs. This quiet balance does not require understanding. It continues naturally even as attention begins to feel heavier and more relaxed. As attention remains soft and unforced, the usual habit of dividing experience into inner and outer can begin to lose its urgency. Thoughts may still appear, but they do not need to be treated as something happening inside, separate from the rest of the night. They arise, linger briefly, and pass, much like sounds or sensations, without requiring a special place to belong. When this distinction relaxes, there is often a sense that experience is happening all at once rather than from a single point. Awareness does not feel located behind the eyes or centered in the body. It feels more like a quiet openness within which sensations, sounds, and even thoughts come and go. Nothing needs to be pushed away and nothing needs to be pulled closer. This openness does not remove individuality or blur everything into sameness. You are still here, resting as yourself, but the feeling of being set apart, positioned on one side of experience and facing another, begins to feel unnecessary. There is no edge that needs to be defended, no boundary that must be maintained in order for things to remain stable. At night, this can feel especially natural. With fewer demands from the world, awareness does not need to contract around tasks or decisions. It can remain spread out, relaxed, allowing experience to unfold without commentary. In this state, the idea of being outside of what is happening simply does not arise in the same way. There is nothing to step into or step away from. You may notice that as this sense of openness continues, effort fades almost without being noticed. Attention becomes heavier, slower, less inclined to follow any single thread. This is not something you need to create. It is what happens when awareness is no longer busy maintaining distance or orientation. The night supports this shift quietly, without interruption. As this part of the story draws to a close, there is no need to remember what has been said or to hold on to a particular feeling. The purpose here is not clarity, but ease. The sense of being outside has softened enough to no longer require attention, making room for a gentler way of resting. In the next section, this easing will continue, allowing the boundaries of experience to relax even further as the night carries everything forward on its own. As this quiet openness continues, there is less need to orient yourself within experience at all. Awareness no longer asks where it is or what it should be paying attention to. It simply remains, allowing everything that appears to pass through without pause or resistance. Sensations lose their urgency. Sounds no longer pull attention outward. Even thoughts soften, appearing more like distant echoes than solid events. In this state, there is no effort to stay present. Presence happens on its own, without being maintained. The body rests where it is, supported and unmoving, while awareness drifts gently, unconcerned with direction. There is no inside that needs to be protected and no outside that needs to be monitored. The distinction itself grows faint, like a line drawn in water that slowly disappears. Nothing is being dissolved or erased. Experience remains exactly as it is. What changes is the need to locate yourself within it. Without that effort, there's a sense of settling, as though attention has found a place where it no longer needs to adjust or respond. This settling does not arrive with clarity or insight. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. If there is a feeling of drifting, you can allow it. If there is a feeling of stillness, that can remain as well. There is no requirement to stay with any particular sensation. Awareness is free to become diffuse, to spread out, or to grow dimmer, following the natural rhythm of the night rather than any instruction. Here the idea of being outside has fully lost its relevance, not because it has been replaced by a new idea, but because it no longer serves a purpose. There's nothing you need to enter and nothing you need to leave. The night holds everything evenly, without separation, without emphasis. As this section comes to rest, attention is already prepared to move more deeply into ease. The boundaries that once seemed important are no longer being held in place. In the next part of the story, this gentle loosening will continue, allowing experience to soften further as the night carries you forward without effort and without asking you to remain awake. As the night deepens, The sense of boundary does not need to disappear all at once. It softens gradually, the way edges do when light fades. Nothing is pushed away, nothing is pulled closer. The distinction between one moment and the next becomes less precise, and attention no longer feels the need to stay oriented. The body continues to rest, supported and unmoving, without asking for adjustment. Where there was once a clear sense of shape or outline, there is now more space. Sensations blend gently into one another, no longer demanding to be identified or held in place. The breath moves slowly, evenly, without drawing attention to itself, as if it were part of the quiet movement of the room. Awareness does not need to remain alert. It can become heavier, more diffuse, spreading out rather than narrowing in. Sounds arrive without direction and fade without leaving a trace. Silence feels fuller, not empty, holding everything without emphasis. There is no longer a need to notice where experience begins or ends. When boundaries soften in this way, effort naturally falls away. There is nothing to monitor, nothing to follow, nothing to keep track of. Attention does not need to stay clear. It can dim slightly, like a light lowered without being turned off. This dimming is gentle and unforced, guided by the rhythm of the night rather than by intention. If thoughts appear, they can drift through without forming a line. If sensations change, they do so quietly, without interruption. Nothing here requires a response. The night is not asking for understanding or participation. It is simply allowing everything to settle at its own pace into a calmer, less defined state. As this softening continues, the sense of separation that once required attention no longer holds its shape. Boundaries remain only where they are useful, and even there they are relaxed. The story will continue to guide awareness deeper into this ease, where nothing needs to be distinguished and nothing needs to be held apart. As boundaries continue to soften, the sense of time often begins to change as well. Moments no longer line up in a clear sequence. One breath does not feel separate from the next. The night does not move forward in steps. It spreads gently like a continuous surface, without marking where one moment ends and another begins. When attention rests here, there is less interest in measuring or tracking anything. You do not need to know how long you have been listening or how much time has passed. The mind no longer looks for progress or direction. It simply remains with what is unfolding, allowing experience to move at its own pace without being shaped into a narrative. This loosening of time can feel subtle. There may be no clear signal that it is happening. Instead, there is a quiet sense that urgency has faded. Nothing is late. Nothing is waiting. The night does not rush toward an ending, and it does not hold you to a schedule. It offers a wide, unmarked space where awareness can rest without effort. In this space, attention becomes less inclined to settle on details. Sensations blend together softly without needing to be distinguished. Sound and silence feel closer to one another, sometimes almost indistinguishable. Even the body's presence becomes more diffuse, felt more as a gentle weight than as a collection of separate parts. There is no need to hold this state or try to remain within it. If awareness drifts, let it drift. If it dims, allow that too. The night supports this easing naturally, without instruction. You are not moving towards sleep. Sleep is simply becoming more possible as boundaries continue to relax, and the need to stay oriented quietly falls away. As the story continues, there is nothing you need to carry forward from this moment. The softening that has begun does not require attention to remain effective. It unfolds on its own, creating the conditions for deeper rest, while awareness grows heavier, slower, and less interested in defining where it is or what it is experiencing. As the sense of time continues to loosen, awareness itself begins to feel less defined. It no longer gathers around a single point or follows a clear line of attention. Instead, it spreads gently, like a dim light filling a room without focusing on any one object. There is no need to keep track of where awareness is resting. It can drift freely, unbothered by direction or purpose. In this softer state, experience does not arrive as separate pieces. Sensations do not announce themselves. Sounds do not ask to be noticed. Even the feeling of the body becomes quieter, less detailed, as though it were resting in the background rather than standing clearly in the foreground. Nothing has disappeared. It has simply moved farther from the center of attention. There is often a moment when the effort to stay aware fades almost completely, not because you decide to let go, but because there is no longer anything pulling awareness into focus. The night does not require clarity. It does not reward alertness. It gently invites attention to rest, to become less distinct, to settle into a state where nothing needs to be named or followed. Thoughts, if they arise, do so without momentum. They no longer form chains or stories. One may appear briefly and then dissolve before it fully takes shape. There is no need to watch this happen. Awareness does not need to stay close. It can remain slightly distant, allowing thoughts to pass without leaving a trace. In this quiet openness, the idea of a boundary becomes almost irrelevant. There is no clear division between attention and what it notices. Experience feels unified, not because everything has merged, but because nothing is being held apart. The distinction between observer and observed grows faint, like a reflection fading as the light changes. You do not need to remain awake for this to continue. Awareness can grow heavier, slower, less interested in staying present. It may dip in and out, sometimes clear, sometimes barely there. This movement is natural. It does not interrupt the unfolding of rest. The night carries it gently, without pause. As this part of the story continues, there is nothing you need to remember and nothing you need to prepare for. The softening that has taken place does not depend on attention. It remains even as awareness drifts, creating a quiet stability where boundaries no longer demand effort and rest becomes increasingly effortless, supported by the steady rhythm of the night itself. As everything continues to settle, there is less and less need for awareness to remain clear. The edges of experience no longer ask to be noticed. They rest quietly in the background, doing nothing in particular. Attention does not need to follow the breath, the body, or the sound of the voice. It can simply remain where it is or drift away without consequence. In this gentle fading, there is no point that needs to be reached. Nothing is about to happen. The night does not move toward an ending. It holds everything in a steady, even way, allowing awareness to dim naturally, like a room growing darker without the lights ever being turned off. If awareness feels distant, that is fine. If it feels absent for moments at a time, that is fine as well. There is no requirement to stay with the story. The words are no longer guiding attention forward. They are only present as a soft background, something that can be listened to or ignored without changing anything. Here, the sense of boundary has softened enough to no longer matter. There is no need to distinguish between listening and resting, between being aware and drifting away. The difference becomes unimportant. Experience continues quietly, without asking to be held or understood. You can allow attention to fade as much as it wishes. The night supports this without interruption. Nothing needs to be watched. Nothing needs to be kept in mind. Everything that is needed for rest is already in place, unfolding gently on its own. As this section comes to a close, awareness is already prepared to move deeper into ease. The story will continue, but it no longer needs your attention. You are free to rest, letting the night carry everything forward, slowly and without effort. As the night continues, there is a quiet sense of being supported that does not need to be noticed in order to remain. Nothing is holding you in a visible or intentional way. There is simply a steady presence already in place, allowing everything to rest exactly as it is. The body remains where it is, supported without effort. The space around it stays unchanged, calm and undisturbed. In this stillness, there is no need to maintain awareness or connection. Nothing needs to be checked or confirmed. The feeling of stability does not depend on attention. It exists whether you notice it or not, much like the ground beneath you, carrying weight without announcing itself. You do not need to lean into it. You do not need to trust it. It is already doing its work. Breathing continues slowly and evenly, without instruction. Each breath arrives and leaves in its own time, not separate from the quiet of the night. The air that moves through the body is the same air that fills the room, the same air that carries sound and stillness together. There is no clear point where one ends and the other begins. Everything rests within the same gentle movement. Here, rest is not something you enter or achieve. It is something that reveals itself when there is nothing left to manage. Awareness does not need to stay alert. It does not need to remain present or focused. It can soften, drift, or grow dimmer without changing the sense of stability that remains underneath. If attention wanders, there is no need to bring it back. If it fades for a moment, that is part of the process. The night does not require participation. It allows everything to unfold quietly, without direction, without effort, without needing to be followed. There is a subtle reassurance in this state, not as a thought or a feeling, but as a background certainty. Nothing is being asked of you. Nothing is expected. You are not required to stay awake or to listen closely. The story remains as a soft presence, while rest continues to deepen on its own. As this part of the night settles further, the sense of being held becomes less noticeable, not because it has weakened, but because it has become unnecessary to recognize. Stability remains, even as awareness loosens its grip, allowing the body and mind to sink naturally into a quieter, heavier ease. carried gently forward by the night itself. As this quiet stability continues, there is less need to locate where rest is happening. It is not centered in the body, and it is not spread across the room. It does not belong to any single place. It simply remains evenly present, allowing everything within it to be held without distinction. Awareness may notice this as a kind of balance, not something achieved, but something already there. Nothing leans too far in one direction. Nothing needs correction. Sensations come and go without shifting the overall sense of ease. Even when something changes slightly, the background remains steady, unaffected by small movements on the surface. In this state, connection does not feel active. It is not something being formed or maintained. It exists quietly, like a shared space where everything rests together without effort. The body rests within it. Sounds pass through it. Thoughts may appear and dissolve within it without leaving an impression. Nothing stands apart long enough to require attention. There is also no need to feel reassured or comforted. The steadiness here does not rely on emotion. It is simpler than that. It is the kind of stability that does not announce itself, the kind that becomes noticeable only when nothing else is asking to be managed. If awareness drifts towards sleep, you can allow that movement. If it remains faintly present, that is fine as well. There is no preference. The night does not require a particular outcome. It allows awareness to hover, sink, or fade, while the underlying sense of rest remains unchanged. This is not a moment that needs to be remembered. It does not contain a message or an insight. It is simply a quiet condition in which everything is already supported. The story continues gently, without drawing attention forward, while rest settles more deeply, spreading evenly through the night without effort and without direction. As this quiet steadiness continues, there is even less reason for awareness to remain involved with what is happening. Nothing is unfolding in a way that asks to be followed. Nothing is changing in a way that needs to be understood. The night has settled into a stable rhythm, and that rhythm does not depend on attention. The body remains supported, unmoving, no longer presenting clear sensations that call for notice. Where sensations remain, they are gentle and indistinct, blending easily into the background. Breathing continues on its own, slow and unremarkable, without creating a center for awareness to gather around. Even the sense of occupying a body begins to feel less defined, more like a quiet presence than a specific location. In this state, connection no longer feels like something between parts. It is not a relationship that needs to be felt or maintained. It is simply the condition in which everything rests together without distinction. There is no need to feel close and no need to feel distant. Those ideas have lost their usefulness here, replaced by a calm neutrality that does not ask to be named. Awareness may begin to move differently now. It may hover briefly, then sink. It may become dim, then briefly clearer without any pattern. These shifts do not matter. They do not interrupt the rest that is already established. The night holds them easily, without responding, without correcting, without asking awareness to stay. There is no instruction here to fall asleep, and no expectation that sleep should arrive at a particular moment. Rest does not require sleep in order to continue deepening. Even if awareness remains faintly present, the conditions for sleep are already in place. The effort to remain awake has faded, and nothing is pulling attention back toward activity. You do not need to stay with the story now. The words no longer carry direction. They exist only as a soft, distant presence, something that can be listened to or allowed to pass by without engagement. Awareness is free to loosen its hold completely, knowing that nothing important is being missed. As this section settles, there is nothing left to do and nothing left to notice. Everything that needed to quiet has already quieted. Stability remains, unchanged and unremarkable, supporting the natural movement toward deeper rest. As the night continues on its own, gently and without interruption. As the night continues, awareness no longer needs to stay present in any deliberate way. There is nothing left to listen for and nothing that needs to be noticed. If attention feels heavy, you can allow that heaviness. If it begins to drift, you do not need to bring it back. The night does not require awareness in order to continue unfolding. At this stage, it is not important whether you are listening or not. The words do not carry information that needs to be understood. They are simply sounds, moving through the quiet, able to be received or ignored without consequence. Even the sound of the voice can soften into the background, becoming less distinct, less demanding of attention. The body remains supported, resting where it is, without asking to be adjusted. Breathing continues on its own, steady and unremarkable. There is no need to notice its rhythm or follow its movement. Everything that is necessary for rest is already happening without your involvement. Awareness may come and go now. There may be brief moments of clarity, followed by stretches where nothing in particular is noticed at all. This is natural. Nothing needs to be maintained. You are not expected to stay awake, and you are not expected to fall asleep. The night allows either to happen without preference. If attention fades, let it fade. If it returns briefly, allow that too. There is no wrong direction. There is no point that needs to be reached. The story is no longer guiding you forward. It is simply present as a quiet accompaniment, while awareness becomes less interested in staying oriented. From here, rest deepens without effort. The sense of being aware becomes lighter, less defined, no longer something that needs to be held in place. You can allow yourself to drift naturally, knowing that nothing important is being missed and nothing needs to be remembered as the night continues steadily, carrying everything forward in silence. At this point, the words no longer need to be followed. Their meaning does not matter, and there is no need to stay with the sound of the voice. They can pass through awareness lightly, like distant noise, present but not requiring attention. Listening can soften, loosen, or fade entirely, without changing anything about the rest that is already in place. Awareness may now feel thin, almost transparent. It does not settle anywhere for long. It drifts, pauses, and drifts again, without forming a clear line. This is not something to notice or correct. It is simply what happens when there is nothing left that needs to be held in mind. The body remains quiet and still, supported without effort. Sensations no longer organize themselves into anything recognizable. They blend together, losing detail, becoming less distinct. Breathing continues, but it does not call attention to itself. Everything essential continues on its own, without supervision. If awareness slips away completely for moments at a time, that is natural. There is no need to return. There is no need to remember where you were or what you were listening to. The night does not require continuity. It allows gaps, pauses, and quiet stretches where nothing in particular is present. Even the sense of being aware can fade now. There is no need to keep track of it. There is no need to stay oriented. The story does not move forward in a way that needs to be followed. It remains as a soft background, easily left behind, while rest deepens without effort. From here, you are free to drift as much as you wish. The words can remain or they can disappear entirely. Nothing depends on them. The night continues steadily, holding everything in the same quiet way as awareness grows lighter, less defined, and increasingly unnecessary. Now there is very little need to stay with the sound of the voice. The words no longer ask to be followed, and they do not carry anything that needs to be remembered. They can remain present, or they can fade entirely without changing the quiet that has already settled. Awareness may feel distant now, or not present at all. There is no need to notice this. There is no need to return. The night continues steadily, without relying on attention, without requiring anything from you. The body rests where it is, supported and unmoving. Breathing continues, soft and unnoticed. Sound and silence blend easily, without standing apart. Nothing is waiting to happen. Nothing needs to be completed. You do not need to listen anymore. You do not need to stay awake. You do not need to follow the voice as it becomes less important. From here, everything continues on its own. The night holds the space evenly, allowing awareness to fade as much as it wishes, without direction, without effort, without needing to remain. You do not need to listen anymore. The words no longer matter. From here, the voice gently steps aside and the sound continues on its own. There is nothing to follow, nothing to understand, nothing you need to stay aware of. The rhythm you will hear now does not ask for attention. It does not guide or explain. It is simply sound, steady, and unhurried, continuing whether you are listening or not. You can allow awareness to fade completely, letting the sound remain in the background, carrying the night forward without effort.
So